agonized over it, but throughout this week, I was like, how do I close this thing? I always think like a good closer or something like that. I didn't want to do just a review of everything that everybody had done. I mean, we had all the classes I thought were excellent. I missed a few because of traveling, and I know Luke's not here, but Grant's here, and I really, really, really appreciate everything that they put into this. I think it made it go great. I want to give some props to Grant. When we got this going, Grant sent out an email to Luke and I and said, hey, here's a bunch of topics. And that kind of set the guideline for us. And so we didn't cover all of those. Before I keep going, I just remembered Grant wanted me to make an announcement on the back counter back there. Grant's got 4 or 5 Bibles. Go ahead and say what you got.
There's one that's an evidence Bible. So as you go through it, it's got all kinds of evidences, sprinkled throughout. There's a Defending Your Faith Bible, brand new in the box. And there's an Old Testament and New Testament commentary that are really good. But like a lot of people, I do my study using a lot of online materials and not so much the books. But if anybody wants them, they're great for gifting or reading.
All right, very good. And what's the price?
Free.
They're free. Awesome. Very good. Okay, so in the course of trying to figure out how to close this, David Posey randomly sent me a quote. I'm going to put it up here in a moment. And he says, you can use this or not, but he says, I just love this gentleman, D.A. Carson. And I do. I like D.A. Carson's thinking. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up here, and I will go ahead and read that. And this is something that he wrote about holiness. And I think this is a good kind of a launch into what we want to talk about this morning. And be thinking about this here because I'm going to ask a question. So this is what D.A. Carson writes. People do not drift towards holiness. Apart from grace-driven effort, people do not gravitate towards godliness, prayer, obedience to Scripture, faith, and delight in the Lord. We drift toward compromise and call it tolerance. We drift towards disobedience and call it freedom. We drift towards superstition and call it faith. We cherish the indiscipline of lost self-control and call it relaxation. We slouch toward prayerlessness and delude ourselves into thinking we have escaped legalism. We slide toward godlessness and convince ourselves we have been liberated. I happen to agree with him. I think he really hit something there. But here's my question to you. Why is this the case? Is that my lapel? Can we turn that? It's really making a big vibration noise. And I know it's probably driving you all crazy. There we go. Why is this the case?
We can't go any lower.
Okay. All right. Why is this the case? Why do you guess?
We are flesh.
Yeah, Dennis.
We are flesh.
We are flesh. Yeah. What else? I see another hand back there. Yeah, Luke.
Well, it takes effort and work, and it requires us to do something. And it's easier to do nothing.
Right. What else? Yeah. So I'm coming back to what Dennis said. We're flesh. This tendency to pull us, and I think this is really important. And this is one of the underlying things that I think came out in the class. It wasn't just, hey, we're holy. There was always an effort. And this is kind of what I'm going to focus on this morning. Because it takes thought, it takes resolve, it takes energy, it takes effort to bring about reform. Yes, Grant?
Yeah, I think that's the case because the flesh and its desires are always in front of us.
Right.
I see them, I feel them, I touch them, I experience them day to day. I see things I want, and those things are at odds with holiness. Right. So God is trying to constantly get us to see past what's in front of us. Right. That's what takes work.
Exactly. And it doesn't get any better. Jerry, hand up? Yeah.
Well, so we repeatedly looked at a lot of passages showing that God's not like us, and we just have to remember that He's the standard, we're not. So we have to work to be like Him, not the other way around.
Right. Exactly. And that's our foundation. That's our focal point. Now he says this phrase: people do not drift towards holiness. What comes to your mind when you think of something or someone drifting? Got a visual? What is that? What comes to mind? You think of drifting. We use this term, this person's drifting, all right? Or sometimes when I go fishing, I like to drift. All right? That means I like to pick up the current. I just drop my line in the water and I let the current just take me wherever I'm going to go. So when you think about someone drifting, you think about maybe somebody, I think of a downward motion, right? Because if you're drifting in water, it's got to be going downhill. That's the only way you're going to drift, all right? So I think the idea here is spiritually we're drifting, we're going downhill. Right.
Drifting generally also is a result of letting go of control.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. So, and if we go with the flow and we end up there, we're probably not going to be happy. Dennis.
Yeah, in Hebrews 2, he says, don't drift away. Well, the problem was we're not paying attention. So
Right.
just not paying attention.
Right. Exactly. So, if we continue to drift and go with the flow, what's going to change? My answer is nothing. I mean, you can say, yeah, you're going the wrong direction, but if we're looking for change, if we're looking for spiritual change, if we're looking for this pursuit of holiness, but we go with the flow and drift, nothing will change. And I think that was part of D.A. Carson's point there that he was trying to drive home. So, with that in mind, what I want to share with you this morning is the idea of pursuing holiness with intention. And there might be a few things from some of the classes that might, resonate with you. And I don't think we'll get through all of this, but I just want to talk about changing our habits, our attitude, and hopefully our character when it comes to our holiness. All the subjects we covered, and Grant, let me know if I missed any here. I know I did, but speech, recreation, home, worship. What were some other ones that we covered? Anybody remember?
Power structure.
Yeah, yes, power structure. That was a very good one, very good class. These all required what? A concerted, intentional effort. Every one of them. I think I only had the opportunity to present a couple classes, the introduction class, and then I talked about holiness in the home. So I'll just reference that. That takes effort. It takes effort for a father to lead his home in holiness. It takes effort for a mother to be a leader in her home with holiness. That all takes effort. It takes practice, takes developing good habits. And so what we're going to be doing as we discuss this, we can also think of this as spiritual disciplines. There could be a number of terms. But let's back up and talk about what this is all about. Right? This is about sin. This all comes back down to our sin. When it comes, and I'm having in mind now this idea of attitudes and habits and things of that nature, we just don't stop sin. Would you agree? I mean, yeah, somebody says, I'm just going to stop doing that. But does it just happen? You just stop sin? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't see myself ever just stopping sin. What has to take place? If we want to see sin, what do we have to do?
Recognize it.
You got to recognize it, Carol.
I said the first thing is you have to know it's sin.
Okay, you got to know it's sin. All right. Once you recognize it, you recognize the destructive nature in it. What do you got to do about it? All right. You've got to be intentional. Did I see a hand over here? Yes. I'm sorry.
Okay, you have to take action and stay focused.
Right. Yeah. You got to stay active. You got to get your head in the game. You have to stay focused. And I tell you what, I'm looking at a room of a lot of wonderful Christian, godly people, and some of us have been around a long time, and the battle is still real, isn't it? I can go back to when I was younger and say this was hard and this was difficult, and there's a lot of truth to that. But even as I get older, I find this battle is constantly before me. And so I have to constantly put forth that effort. I have to constantly be intentional. Yes?
As we're discussing this, it also comes to my mind that it's not just me, because I can never be holy as much as I try.
Right.
So I need to go to God and any of the other resources that He's given us, such as His Word and His church, and get encouragement and instruction, but mostly from God.
Right.
Pray for help from the Holy Spirit. And so, yeah, I can never do it all on my own. As hard as I try. much effort as I put into it.
Right. And that points back to God's grace. Absolutely. Go to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. I need somebody to read that for us. Let me know if you've got it. So we're going to look at several passages this morning, time permitting. But Romans 12, 1 through 2. Who's got that? You have to raise your hand really high here for me. Let me know. Yes, yes, Scott, in the back.
Romans 12, 1 through 2.
Yes.
I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is God, acceptable and perfect.
All right, so, I'm sorry. So Paul says we have to change the way we think. This is what he's saying. We have to change the way we think. We got to have our minds renewed. Why? So we can begin to understand God's will for us. All right, and that's going to take effort. It's going to take intention. There are two words in verse 2 that stand out. Do you know what they are? There's two words that jump out. You're probably going, Scott, there's a lot of words in verse 2, but I'm looking at two. Conformed, yes, somebody, and then what's the other one? Transform. Let's talk about these two words for a moment, because this has a lot to do with our attitude and our habits that we develop. So when you think of something being conformed, what comes to your mind? You can use like a secular type application, but when you think of conformity, what might come to your mind? I got some examples. Conform. All right, let me help you out. Are there any bakers in here? Not baker family, but in the kitchen, bakers? Do you use cookie molds? Yes? No? I'm going to assume you do, all right? When you put the dough or whatever you're putting in the mold, that's conforming, right? That mold is set, all right? Now, I love this word because this is a reflection of my career as a machinist. I used to work in some tool and die. Tool and die, we would make molds for things that you enjoy. Go out to your car, every part in your car came out of a mold. Some machinist somewhere created a mold, designed that mold, they pour plastic into it, and it forms. All right, look everywhere around you. So the idea, again, is conformity. So when something is pressed into the mold, it takes shape. Right? So what is Paul saying? What were they conformed to? You were conformed to what? Just shout it out. The world. You were conformed to the world. All right, now look at the second word. This is a really cool word here. All right, transform. What comes to mind? Transformation. My mind went to grade school and a butterfly. What do you think when you think of transformation? What does the word mean? What's that?
Change.
It means change. I took some time to kind of break this word down. Again, it comes from the Greek word metamorpho. I may not have that right. Where we get the word what? Metamorphosis. All right, so that's the change. So this Greek word is actually a combination of two, meta and morpho. And meta means change after being with. Because change after being with. Morpho means changing form in keeping with an inner reality. So the metamorpho here, the definition of for our purposes, is an outward change that reflects an inner reality after being with someone. That someone being God. Right? So I think that's really. Can I say hand? Yes.
It occurs to me that both conforming and transforming involve change. Conforming, you go from a blob to drifting into the mold.
Yeah.
And so you're when you're a babe, you're going to change.
Yeah.
Are you going to just go from a beautiful blob to, what the world has you falling into, drift into that? Or are you going to make a purposeful choice to change into something? So it goes back to that drifting versus
Yes.
a concerted effort toward a purpose.
Right, and I'm glad you saw that connection, because that's what I was thinking as I was putting it. That's the idea. So and putting this in perspective too, so when you're in the world, we are conformed to those practices, to those mindsets, to those habits. This is what Paul is saying, all right? We've been studying this in our James class as well. Now he's saying, be transformed how? What's he say there in verse 2? Just spit it out. How does this transformation take place?
Renewal of our mind.
By the renewing of the mind. So let's just kind of think about that for a moment. This spiritual metamorphosis is not an easy process. I know we talked about that, kind of brought that up a moment ago, but I want to take this a little bit more. The process of holiness, this process of sanctification, I want to come back to what Janet said earlier about it being a choice. You know, we're kind of go back to D.A. Carson's quote. We're just not, whoa, I'm holy. Look at this. I'm holy. No, God has provided everything for us to be holy. And when he said that in Peter, be holy for I am holy, he's telling us we can do that, we should be that, but it's going to take effort. But I just wanted to take a moment here because I never want to leave the impression that our desire, our spiritual disciplines, our desire to be godly, holy, set apart, is not just an easy road. It's not something we just kind of hop into. And I know most of us in this room know that. We all have experiences. But it's important that we just take a few moments and recognize it is a struggle. It is a struggle. It's strenuous, it's difficult, and it's not going to happen unless we do our part. Unless we put that effort out. Think about this for a moment. Yes, Jerry?
When I think of that passage in Romans, an image that comes to my mind is no matter what I do, the sink fills up with dirty dishes, and the mantle fills up with dust, and the laundry basket fills up with stuff, and I got to be constantly cleaning house. I got to be, if I'm not constantly renewing, it goes downhill.
Yeah.
I got to refresh it constantly.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a habit. There we go. It's a habit. Here's the thought. People are conformed to this world with deep habits, deep beliefs, and deep convictions. If you've sat down with somebody, met somebody who is very worldly, I'm not going to try to find a classification of that, we'll just call them worldly. When you sit down and you speak with them, maybe trying to share with them the gospel, you will often come across people who are very, like I said, they have these deep habits. They've got ingrained attitudes, right? And if those individuals, Lord willing, want to come out of that, get a relationship with Jesus, they're going to be able to do that. But it can be a challenge. It can be difficult at times. So to break out of that, you got to be intentional. I thought about you, Terry, in class. I was going over some notes this morning. I thought, a doctor will help you all he or she can, but they expect you to be intentional about your health. Would you agree with that, Terry? That's kind of a silly softball question. But when you go to the doctor says you need to take this and do this and do this. And I'm sure Terry has looked at patients and say, but you have to do this every day. You have to take this every week, or you've got to do this kind of exercise. There's only so much I can do for you. Only so much. And in a sense, there's so much that God has done for us. Much more than a doctor. But he's done so much for us. But he's looking, he goes, I provided all these things, all right? Let me help you be intentional about it. And it's frustrating. As I think somebody pointed out, and maybe it was me just now, but we are facing new challenges every day. There's something David Posey says sometimes when we get together and talk, and he's mentioned it in sermons, that we're only a heartbeat away from apostasy. All right? He's not saying we're hanging on the fringe here and Folsom's going down the deep hole. He's just saying all it takes is one moment to get our minds off God, one moment to get caught up in a belief or something that might drag us away. In the blink of an eye. And so his point there is we have to make this concerted effort. We have to stay sharp, right? We have to stay focused on God's word. as we go through this. And so, again, it takes intentionality to be holy. So let's talk about how do we become more intentional. And so I came up with a couple of points here, did some studying, came across some really good studies. So I'm going to share some of the things I came across, some of the things that I want to share with you. But I want to get started with this thought. We talked about sin a moment ago. All right? But I want to ask you this question. Again, you can just spit out the answer. Who were you, or what condition were you in before God's grace changed you? Who were we? It's a one word, starts with S and ends with S. We were sinners. All right? So let's just camp there for a moment. All right? So we were sinners. 1 John chapter 3, verse 4 says, everyone who practices sin practices lawlessness. So before God's grace, and I'm talking about the grace that led us to righteousness, the grace that led us to obedience, right? Before God's grace, we were practicing lawlessness. Now, a lot can be said about this verse, but I want to key in on one word. I want to look at the word practice. Some versions use the word continue. And there may be some other words depending on the Bible version you're using. So we practice sin, we continue sin. So when you practice something, when you continue something, you develop a habit. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Think of, anybody have some good habits you want to share? No good habits? Anybody, a habit you've developed? Any musicians? All right? Musicians, practicing something, sports, all right? You practice something, yes, Dennis.
Well, I thought you were asking.
Yeah, keep
I
that
think
in.
it was rhetorical. Roy Bridge has developed the habit of greeting.
Yes. That's right. That's right. All right. Sorry, Michelle's right here, but you know, you've got the Sanderson family, you have it. When I don't see them there, I'm like, what's up? They're either traveling or something. But we develop these habits, whether they're spiritual habits, habits in our life. But we get there, again, because we've practiced, right? We've set our minds to do that. I watched the Tokyo Games. I love track and field. Absolutely love it. And this week, I pulled up some YouTube videos because I didn't watch the whole thing. I think it was a couple weeks ago. And man, I was blown away by some of the records that were broken. Our women's 400-meter relay team was amazing. And they talked about their relentless practice of handing off the baton. So if you ever ran track, I was on relays, the number one thing our coach had us practice was handing off the baton. He goes, I want you to dream it, I want you to think about it, he didn't use the word, I want it to become a habit. Boom, boom. He says, I don't care how fast you run right now, we have to nail that handoff. That is key to winning this race. Yes, Greg?
I had a choir teacher once that said, practice doesn't make perfect, it makes permanent.
Yeah.
So if you practice it wrong over and over again, that'll become permanent.
Yeah.
Exactly. Doing it right, doing it the way you're supposed to be, and testing and discerning with the will of God is knowing what it's supposed to be, so we know when we're getting it right.
That's right. Exactly. It comes back to Romans chapter 12. So let's give it so Webster's talking about habits now. Webster says it's a settled or regular tendency or practice, especially one that is hard to give up. It can also be defined as a prevailing disposition or character of a person's thought or feelings. And I'm sure you would probably come up with a number of definitions. So, kind of to cap on that, habits are the thought and emotional patterns engraved in our minds through practice, right? Through these things, so they become a habit. And so it's no wonder why habits are hard to break, huh? Now, we want to break the bad ones. Right, we definitely want to break the bad ones. We don't want to break the good ones. We want to develop the good ones, the good habits. All right, but it just makes you think for a moment. I've worked really hard, and this has become a habit in my life. And I think it'd be important now just to pause for a moment. Just popped in my head, so I'm going to share it. That when we're studying with people, leading them to the Lord, and they have developed habits Maybe I will even go far as maybe using the word addiction in some cases, but when they have developed habits that have been ingrained in them, the most important thing they need from us as we show them the holiness of God is what? Our compassion and our love and our understanding and our long suffering. Because these things are hard to break. And I think sometimes as God's people, I know I've been guilty of this. I know sometimes it's wrong. Why are you still doing that? I thought we stopped that. Why? Scott, I'm struggling. I've done this for years. Okay, how can we help you? Well, so I just wanted to kind of lay that out there to not forget the importance of compassion. Yes, Jamie.
Well, I think we need to be careful about how we view other people's problems.
Right.
It's so easy when I don't struggle with a particular problem that maybe some of my brother does. It can be easy for me to say, "Why are you still doing that?"
Right.
But when you're the person dealing with that problem, it is hard to get out of it. You have a number of factors affecting that. So I think I've learned this is that I need to, it may not be a problem for me, but it's obviously a problem for them. And the problems I deal with, some other person may just say, well, just stop it. But it's not that easy.
Right.
We need to get grace and compassion and love, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. And we could probably all have things we said, yeah, I had a really hard time overcoming this. This was a battle for me. And sometimes it still rears its ugly head, doesn't it? You know, not that we give into it, but, oh man, I'm not going there. We're going to talk about that here in a few moments too. So go to Romans 6:19. I know there's a lot in this chapter, but just for sake of time, go to Romans 6:19. I'll go ahead and read that. So Paul here in chapter 6 is talking about being slaves to righteousness. Just a real powerful section here. But he says in verse 19, I am speaking in human terms because of your natural limitations. For just as you once presented your members as slaves to impurity and to lawlessness, leading to more lawlessness, so now present your members as slaves to righteousness, leading to what? Sanctification. Holiness. So I want to take a moment and just kind of break this down and kind of visualize one of the things that came to my mind when I read this. When we were sinners, and that what we just talked about, when we were sinners, we gave ourselves to developing, I'm going to use the word habits. We gave ourselves to developing habits of unholiness. We developed practices. Notice what he says there again in verse 19. All right? You presented your members as slaves. In other words, they were owned by it. All right? They were controlled by it. Now, he's not taking away the choice. All right? But he's just saying, this is where you landed. This is the condition that we were in. So every time we sin, whether it's we lusted, we coveted, we hated, we cheated, we lied, whatever it is, we were developing those practices with ever-increasing wickedness. This is what Paul's saying here. As you continued in this thing, what does he say? What's the word he uses there in verse 19? To lawlessness leading to more lawlessness. It's almost that snowball effect. All right? It's just more and more and more. And as Janet pointed out at the beginning of class, you are not going to get out of that by yourself. There's no way. We're not going to get out of that situation by ourselves. So now look at the second part. All right? In verse 19. Now, he says, present your members, all right, your body, as slaves to righteousness, leading to sanctification. All right, so this is where we want to spend our time now for just a moment. All right? So this is not necessarily a question for you. This is just kind of to get us going. So let's talk about how we develop some of these spiritual habits. Now, things might come to our mind like, I should pray more, more Bible study. Absolutely. We could sit here and probably just make a list. If I had a whiteboard, we could just write a list of things as God's people that we could develop better habits. Right? But I want to look at this in a little different way, or look at some other points here. And the first one that I don't have it up there. The first one is frequent repetition. Now, you're probably looking at that and say, Scott, you just said that with the word habit. Yes, but I just wanted to look at this from a little different direction. This is another definition of habit, is what it is, all right? It's a behavior pattern acquired by frequent repetition. And I think this is some of the principle. He doesn't come out and say it, but I think this is some of the principle that Paul's bringing out here in Romans chapter 6, right? This idea. So look at it this way. The fact that the more we sin, the more we are inclined to sin, look at the opposite. And I think this is where we want to go. The more we say no to sin, the more we're inclined to say no. Would you agree with that? You can nod, say yes, give me a thumbs up. Yeah. Everybody in this room can say absolutely. The more I say no to sin, the more I put up my filters, my boundaries, drive home a different way, whatever it was that was a trigger or a struggle for you, the more you say no to that, all right, the more we're pushing Satan away a little bit. What does he say in James? Resist the devil and he will what? He will flee from you. It would be nice if that was like a one-time thing, right? But he's not. James is driving home a really important point there. All right, so in the same manner, we can develop positive habits for holiness. We're going to look at some passages here in a little bit. I'm going to get some readers. But, our thinking patterns, our thoughts. So I'll give you one that happened this morning. So we got in the car, and Carolyn knows me. It was 9:03. We were late. 9:03 means I'm going to be late, but not really. All right? 15-minute drive. So we're going along, and then the car said empty. Carolyn says, you're fine. You've got 40 miles. And I said, I am running on your trust, baby. All right, so now the car says empty because we forgot to gas up last night. We turn the corner, and there's cars stopped on the road. And I'm like, there was a dog in the road. And Carolyn's like, oh, I hope they... And I'm like, get the dog out of the road. We got places to be. And so what I'm saying is my thought at the time was not... My thought became about Scott getting here, and I got anxious, and then I've learned to kind of make jokes about it. Carolyn had a song on the radio, and I went, oh, that's a real pretty version of this song. I am just doing everything I can to change my attitude. And it worked. We turned the corner, we started talking about stuff. But there's always that challenge. And so I have to develop a habit. We develop the habits of prayer, meditation on Scripture. I mentioned that. And again, they are developed through frequent repetition. And this only means that we replace old habits with new ones. All right, and then let's get some Bible passages here. All right, so get your Bibles ready. I'm not doing all the reading. Proverbs 22:6. Who's got it? If you don't take it, I'll call you on. I'll call you out. Yes, Luke 22:6. Galatians 6:9. Who wants to take that for us? Dennis. Hebrews 10:24 through 25. Who will take that one? All right, Steve. Psalms 119:11. Who will take that one? Diane. And then Reed, take Philippians 4:8. And I'm just sharing these scriptures with you with the idea of habits. And the Bible doesn't always use the word habit. Just like we may or may not have time to get to the attitude portion of this. But it's definitely laid here. Okay, who's got Proverbs 22:6? All right, Luke, please.
Proverbs 22:6. Train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it.
All right, remember this is a proverb. Just a little side note reminder, this is not an absolute rule. These are proverbs, these are words of wisdom. But what is he telling the parent there? Did you see something there? Train a child. How many of us develop habits for help our kids develop habits? Brushing their teeth, right? Those things. How about their spiritual habits? That begins at a very young age. Kind of coming back to what Janet said earlier about being conformed and transformed. All right? We don't want them to be conformed for the world. So as parents, we start the process of teaching, training, and building habits in their lives. All right, what was the next one? Galatians 6:9. Who has that?
Let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary.
All right, what do you see in there? Let us not grow weary. It goes back to what I said earlier. It's hard, isn't it? What Paul is saying there in Galatians chapter 6 is that you can grow weary on this, but don't let it happen. Right? Maintain these spiritual habits. Hebrews 10:24 through 25.
And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our own assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near.
Okay, so there we did have the word habit, and Paul, or whoever the writer is, I don't know that it's Paul, whoever the writer is there was stressing the point of stirring one another, because what habit had they fallen into? Of not being with the brethren. So he uses that word there, and that should be interpreted as a very strong word. This has become a practice. They've developed the habit of not assembling, not doing those things. So Paul's saying, stir, or the writer's saying, stir them up. Stir them up. Help them to see these things. Psalms 119:11.
I have stored up your word in my heart, that I may not sin against you.
I have stored up my word. I see habit in there. I see practice. I've meditated. I've studied your word. I'm storing it. The only way to write something on your heart, the only way to store something on your heart is to repeatedly read it, meditate on it, talk to God about it. All right, Philippians 4:8.
Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if anything worthy of praise, think about these things.
Paul is talking about our thought life right there. What a verse that probably a lot of us, maybe some of us aren't completely familiar with this passage. Beautiful chapter there in Philippians. But what's he saying again? Whatever those things, I love the word whatever. Whatever you find that can glorify God. I'm going to add my thoughts. Whatever will draw you to God in holiness. Whatever will draw you to that, what do I want you to do? I want you to set your mind, going back to Romans chapter 12, conform versus transform by the renewing of your mind. He says later on in Philippians, or early in Philippians, he says, set your mind, or have this, no, that's in Colossians. He says, have this mind in you, which was also in Jesus Christ. All right, so we see this idea, this thought throughout the scriptures. So another thing that will help us is never let an exception occur. What do I mean by that? You're practicing something, okay, a good spiritual habit. All right? But then you let an exception in. What happens when you're doing something very positive and good and healthy, but the exception is unhealthy or the old choice? You all know what I'm talking about, right? All right, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. Oh. Let me just kind of give a simple version of that. Okay, I'm going to read my Bible every day, right? And maybe for some of us, that's the habit. Honestly, I struggle with that one. I read a couple days and I don't. Then I read some more, so I cannot sit here and tell you that I am a faithful daily Bible reader. I go in chunks. My life gets busy and there's other things that I do. But when that habit, I'm too tired to pray tonight, right? Or I'm too tired of this. In other words, if we allow this exception in, and we do sometimes, all right? I think what happens is we allow this, if we allow this into a new habit, we are in danger of maybe reinforcing the old practice. It's a warning. It's just something to think about. Jen?
I think that there's a big distinction that between a slip up and an exception. So, like when we're raising our kids, if there was a baseball game or a Girl Scout event or something that happened on them know what is more important. And people, like coaches and different things, they, at the beginning of the year meeting, they would say, oh, well, this is just a one-time thing. This is just, you make an exception. When you're making the exception, you're saying which one is more important.
Right.
At least that's the message that's getting through to your kids.
Right.
But a slip up, it typically is not necessary. I mean, if I characterize it as a slip up, it means that I fell short. I did not do what I intended to do. But if I'm making an exception, that is me, in my mind, saying which one is more important.
Exactly. Yeah, I love it. You're spot on. That's exactly what I was pointing out. Carolyn.
When I deal with people who are addicts, I'll tell them when they make the choice to go back, I say you get to choose whether this is a speed bump or a brick wall. And that's what I see when things happen, whether it be a slip up, an exception, a make a poor choice. Is it something that we go, wow, I made a mistake, let me keep going on the path I'm going?
Right.
Or is it a brick wall that kind of, 3 years later we're so deep in the addiction it's harder to recover from? And I think about that with sin, is that we do sometimes do things that we shouldn't. And is it going to send us down a path that is, we just hit a brick wall and we're a disaster, or are we going to let it be a speed bump and keep on the path towards God?
Exactly. And to that thought, let's just, it's not in my notes, but when we hit those speed bumps, when we want to make that exception, I go back to Hebrews chapter 10 that we read a moment ago. And not so much the forsaking of the assembly, but that stirring up part. Isn't that powerful? When the writer here says, consider how we can stir one another up. Consider how we can say and do and influence and be an example to one another. I mean, I look at this audience, and every one of us are in a spiritual battle. And we're struggling going through things. And then to look at this audience or look at God's people or my Christian friends across the United States, what a blessing and a grace we have to have people help us over those things. And that's all because of God's grace. That's all because of our relationship with Jesus. Yes, Lisa.
It's hard to wrap my mind around that, of what we're talking about, because no one does everything 100% perfectly.
That's right.
So how do you want to talk about that part?
You mean like failure? Or no, we don't.
Say a habit of no sugar, or a habit of of working out, or reading your Bible.
Right.
You're not going to do it 100% of the time. So if I slip up, am I beating myself up that I'm not good enough? Oh man, I'm so far behind other people. I'm such a failure. I am,
Right.
Fill in the blank.
Right. So first of all, coming back to Janet's comment on that, all right? We're talking about here, and to answer your question, yes, how many of us, you have to raise your hands, didn't read our Bible every day last week? Yeah, things happen, all right? Life gets in the way. We're not talking about so much those things that get in the way and that can hinder. That's part of life. And I would hope that we wouldn't beat ourselves up. Oh, I didn't read the Bible today. Maybe that was a poor example. The idea here is we are trying to develop spiritual habits to take us out of sin. Not reading your Bible, maybe a few other things I wouldn't classify as that. But I think it's the idea of recognizing I was in sin, I need to get out of those habits. And some of those habits will draw us back, and we will fall short. I thought Carolyn's example was excellent. But Terry.
Yeah, that's a good explanation. I look at it in 1 John chapter 3, he instructs us to practice righteousness and delight in him. So righteousness being those things that are acceptable to God. So we do sin, and John identifies that. But when we sin, we have an advocate, the Father. To look at it, I think another good example is King Solomon in 1 Kings in chapter 4. God ended on through 4 through 11, God appeared to him twice to put away the foreign wives. So at some point, Solomon decided well, I know this is outside of the commandment, I'm going to marry just one. But it turned into, we know it turned into many. And finally we know the story. God used that word practice when he appeared to him the third time and said, I'm going to tear the kingdom away from you. He said, because since this has been your practice,
Yes.
it's that practice, it's that continually transgressing, and as was pointed out, it's a conscious decision to transgress.
Right. Excellent point. Excellent. Thank you very much for the study. Next week, if you're next week, if you're in here, we're diving into 2 Corinthians. All right. Appreciate you. Thank you.